A boy is reborn in a world where magic exists and dreams of living a quiet life, but with a remarkable talent for water magic. He soon realizes he'll have to train hard if he wants to survive in the strange new land he's been sent to. It all begins in a vast forest with mountains rising in the distance. In the middle of that forest stood a house where a young boy lay stretched out on his bed. He got up, left his room, and after glancing at 2 books and a knife on the table, stepped outside to take in the clear blue morning sky. That's when he said, "Water, come to me." Instantly, a ball of water formed in his hand, only to vanish moments later, leaving nothing but a small puddle in his palm. In the next scene, the boy found himself somewhere surreal where a man greeted him by name Ryou. It had been ages since this man last visited that place, and he informed Ryou that he had died in a car accident. The boy nodded, saying he remembered, then asked if the man before him was God. The stranger explained that he wasn't, but was something closer to an angel. From then on, Ryou started calling him Miguel, just to keep things simple. After learning he was about to be reincarnated, Ryou asked what he was supposed to do in that place. While he waited, Miguel told him to live as he pleased. He hadn't been given any mission, so he seemed free to explore. In that case, the boy admitted he just wanted a peaceful life. That's when Miguel revealed that the world Ryou would be reincarnated into was called Fate, a place brimming with magic. In this universe, around 20% of humans could use sorcery, and Ryou's strongest affinity was with the element of water. Because he wanted a quiet life, Miguel said Ryou would be sent to the Rondo Forest, where he'd find a house ready for him, stocked with 2 months' worth of supplies, including a cold room with food. On top of that, the angel would make sure monsters stayed away from his new home, setting up a kind of protective barrier. Flipping through the beginner's edition of the Monster Compendium Mahora, Ryou noticed he'd never seen that alphabet before. Yet somehow he could read everything just fine. The other book was called the Flora Compendium. Out in the backyard, the newly reincarnated boy conjured up a bit of water. After some practice, he realized he didn't need to speak any commands. As long as he pictured the element in his mind, that was enough. A shame really, since he'd love to shout water jet when taking down an unsuspecting enemy. Soaking in his bathtub, he conjured more water and noticed he could only summon it at room temperature. Another disappointment, since a hot bath would have been perfect in that weather. With considerable effort, Ryou tried to make fire in his backyard by rubbing 2 sticks together. But as he said himself, it's important to know when to give up if it's just not going to happen. Exhausted, he lay in the grass, staring up at the sun. Gazing at the bucket of water on the ground, he wondered if he could make ice after all. It would be great to invent a spell and call it Ice Lance. With that in mind, the boy concentrated on the water in the bucket, compressing it while pulling the heat away, imagining the H2O molecules at the center, connecting the oxygen atom with the hydrogen atoms at the neighboring molecules. When he finally managed it, Mihara smiled as he watched the water gradually freeze. Soon after, he shaped a small ice sphere and used it to reflect sunlight onto some wood, managing to spark a fire at last. With that little victory, Ryou managed to heat his bathwater and called his first day a success. Knowing he had plenty to do tomorrow, he went straight to bed after his bath. When morning came again, the new resident of Rondo Forest ate some meat and, remembering Miguel had left him 2 months' worth of food, realized he'd need to start hunting once the supplies ran out. The forest lay outside the barrier, which meant it was definitely home to monsters, so Ryou would need some strong magic to defend himself. A simple knife wouldn't cut it. Wasting no time, he headed into the backyard and fired a ball of water at a nearby tree. His aim was good, but he knew that little splash wouldn't be enough to take down a wild boar. Still, Ryou had an ace up his sleeve. If the water ball didn't work, maybe a water jet would. Focusing, he stepped back from the tree and pictured a thinner stream before firing off a jet of water, but it barely traveled farther than a spit. Feeling like a failure, he knelt down and remembered asking Miguel how to use magic. The angel told him the essence of magic was imagination. You needed a clear picture of what you wanted, and with practice, your ability would grow. Following that advice, Ryou trained until sundown, eventually developing a decent water jet. When night fell, he reversed the process he'd used to make ice in the bathtub, this time heating the water for his bath. The next day, he tried creating ice directly in the air, which worked, though it took longer than he expected. Once he pulled it off, he set his sights on the next day, crafting an icicle lance. When he hurled the icy projectile, it barely made it a short distance, nowhere near as far as water in its liquid state. Given how tricky it was to make and the short range, Ryou decided it was useless in a real fight. For now, he'd just need to keep training until he could perfect the technique. Switching things up, Ryou conjured balls of water all across the sky and shot them upward with force. Afterward, he returned to practicing the icicle lance, training until dusk and nearly draining his mind. Coming back inside for something to eat, he realized he should have started the fire while it was still light out, so he ended up spending the night in the dark. Days went by with Ryou faithfully studying and honing his magic in the backyard. After some time, he could summon the icicle lance, instantly a big improvement even if it still didn't travel very far. With this new skill, he crafted a spear with an icy tip and set off for the forest beyond the barrier that protected his home. Not long after, still at the very start of his adventure, Ryou finds quartz by the river, just as he'd hoped. With this stone, he could start a fire even without the sun, something that could prove extremely useful. All he needs now is to find some detoxifying herbs, and today's adventure will be a complete success. Still, he has to stay alert. There are beasts lurking nearby, ready to make him their prey at any moment. Right on cue, a lesser boar bursts onto the scene and attacks without a second thought, causing Ryou to freeze on the spot. But just as he's about to take a hit, he manages to react in time. Dodging the boar's brutal charge, the beast crashes headlong into a tree with such force that it topples over. Facing this critical moment, Ryou does his best to keep his wits about him. Even though fear and inexperience keep him from moving well, he still has magic on his side in this world. Drawing on his power, Ryou conjures a path of ice that snakes across the ground, pulling the boar right toward him. Then he prepares 16 ice spears, driving them into the beast in a flurry of strikes. The end works, and the fight is over in an instant. That night back home, Ryou reads that lesser boars are listed as some of the weakest monsters. The thought sends chills down his spine, remembering how much trouble he had dealing with just one. Flipping through his monster book, he notices the last 2 pages are set apart like a special chapter not meant for beginners. There, he finds the following dragon. On their own, they can easily destroy an entire city. Note if you see one run, though you might just get away. There's another entry to demon, not a fallen angel, origin unknown. No, pray you never cross paths with one. Reading these descriptions, Ryou realizes the world is far bigger and far more dangerous than he imagined. The next day, he heads back into the forest and gathers some fruit, sweet and sour at the same time, just the way he likes it. Suddenly, a bird soaring overhead nearly snags him with its talons. Moments later, it unleashes a wind attack that slices several nearby trees clean in half. Ryou immediately realizes the stakes have just been raised. To protect himself, he races through the forest, conjuring ice shields along his path to block the enemy's spells. While running, he remembers the creature, the killer falcon, master of the wind slash. Ryou counters by firing water jets, but the bird is swift, dodging everyone in a sudden burst of speed. It dives toward him like a bullet, but as it closes in, Ryou summons an ice dome, which the falcon crashes into head first, slamming it to but the fight isn't over. Showing remarkable resilience, the bird staggers up and takes flight again, though its right eye is badly injured and useless. Maybe realizing its own limitations, the enemy finally decides to leave, much to Mihara's relief. Still, things aren't all smooth sailing. Thanks to his wild chase with a bird, Ryou loses his way home and ends up stranded in the forest until nightfall. Following a certain direction, he stumbles upon a beautiful lake where he sees a headless knight and a headless of course, gliding across the water. The next day, Ryou is back in the forest, sticking to his hunting routine. This time, he takes down a gigantic, menacing snake. That night, he even manages to bring home some fish. The day after, the adventurer upgrades his ice barrier and explores the ocean floor after reaching the coast, only to be chased off by a huge octopus defending its home. As time passes, young Mihara masters a spell called Abrasive Jet, capable of shooting a jet from a ball of water in the sky, powerful enough to slice a rock in half. With more study, he discovers that if he uses magic to harden ice, he can use it as a substitute for abrasive grit, a big leap forward in his knowledge. One night at the glowing lake, he comes face to face again with the headless knight. The monster compendium makes no mention of a Dullahan, making Ryou suspect this creature is far beyond beginner level. Still, for some reason, he feels confident enough to challenge it. In the clash that follows, the Dullahan blocks every strike with ease, forcing Ryou to use ice shards as shields whenever a counterattack looms. After only a few seconds, Ryou collapses, exhausted, and realizes he's nowhere near ready to face this thing yet. He isn't there just to fight. Something tells him the Dullahan actually wants to train him. The monster then forms a water sword from its own weapon and hands it to the young human before vanishing into the night. The next day, Ryou runs into the killer falcon again. But now the bird is even more menacing, cloaked in a strange darkness. When attacked, Ryou conjures 5 layers of ice wall, but the creature's wind magic shatters them with ease. Sensing how dire things have become, he keeps moving and rebuilds the walls to stay safe. Even after summoning 10 ice walls, the falcon tears through everyone. Ryou tries to counter with icicle spears, but the falcon dodges them all without effort. With an unknown ability, the bird destroys the ice barriers Ryou had just rebuilt, leaving him completely exposed. As if that wasn't enough, the killer falcon hurls a lightning spell that almost finishes him off. Refusing to give in, Ryou switches to his water sword instead of magic to defend himself. With this weapon, he manages to deflect the bird's attacks and keep it at bay, regaining his confidence. Patient and focused, Ryou waits for the next dive from the killer falcon and at the perfect moment plunges his sword into the beast as it streaks past. After delivering such a deep blow, the adventurer approaches the bird, which is still clinging to life, and thanks it for the opportunity to learn so much from their battle. He knows that if he hadn't become stronger by this day, he surely would have died against this opponent when he came back for another attack. Out of respect for the hawk who had also grown seeking revenge for its lost right eye, Ryou promises to give the creature an honorable end. With that, he withdraws his sword from the enemy's body and brings its life to a close. In the next scene, a red dragon soars above the skies of the Rondo forest where Mahara is walking, until he suddenly finds himself face to face with that colossal winged entity. Wasting no time, the dragon lands in front of the human and, communicating through telepathy, asks if he has seen a killer hawk that has evolved in the area. At first, thinking the hawk was a servant of this monster, Ryou apologizes. The dragon instantly realizes the bird was slain by this young man. Impressed by the human's strength, the dragon glances at his waist and notes that he's carrying the Fairy King's sword. If the king entrusted him with that weapon, the dragon says, the king must think very highly of him. Not so sure about that, Ryou admits he'd actually like to ask the flying lizard a few questions. Later, as the afternoon fades, the dragon hears a distant call and bids farewell to his new companion. Before departing, he reveals his name, Lewin. Watching the creature fly away, Ryou smiles and admits he never would have imagined he'd get the chance to talk with a dragon. Meanwhile, Miguel regrets having overlooked something important. Holding a tablet in his hands, he discovers that for some reason Ryou possesses a secret trait, something that hasn't happened since he sent that girl to another world 10,000 years ago. The name of this ability, Eternal Youth. I appreciate you viewing my anime recap, Unruly Family. Please let me know what you think about this anime recap by liking, sharing, and commenting, and please subscribe to the channel to help us reach 5,000 subscribers.
Take you